All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome to This Explainer, where we are going to embark on a pretty profound journey today. I want you to imagine, just for a second, being trapped in a dark, completely inescapable room. The walls are closing in, and no matter how hard you push, the doors simply won't budge. Well, that is the lived reality of active addiction. But what if there was a blueprint to not only unlock that door, but to completely rebuild the whole house from the ground up? Today, we're looking at the 12-step program and holistic recovery pathways. And we're not just looking at them as a set of rules. We're looking at them as a comprehensive, scientifically backed blueprint for achieving emotional sobriety and, literally, rewiring the addicted brain. We're going to trace this journey from the absolute darkest depths of isolation, straight through to the profound light of healing.
Now, I want you to really consider this question for a moment, because it challenges basically everything society has traditionally told us. Is addiction a moral failing or a response to trauma? For decades, right, we've treated addiction as this failure of willpower or some kind of moral shortcoming. But to truly understand recovery, we absolutely have to bypass that stigma right out of the gate. We need to frame addiction through the lens of science, biology, and honestly, deep emotional pain. It's not so much a question of why the addiction, but rather, why the pain? And that brings us to Act 1, the root and the surrender. So in the 12-step model, this whole process starts with step 1, admitting powerlessness over the addiction and recognizing that life has just become completely unmanageable. Now, I know that sounds a lot like defeat, but surrendering that illusion of control, it is the absolute foundational requirement for change. You can't fix a foundation if you refuse to admit it's cracked in the first place, right? And to truly surrender, we have to look closely at that crack. As Dr. Gabor Mate points out, the drug or the compulsive behavior is rarely the actual problem. Actually, it's an unconscious attempt to solve a problem. In his work with hardcore drug users, he noted that they never came in and said, "Doc, I was traumatized." No, they just thought they were bad people. They didn't realize they were using substances as a desperate mechanism to soothe things like unrecognized childhood neglect, family dysfunction, or deep trauma. Addiction, in a way, is a highly effective, though ultimately destructive painkiller for the soul. And our environment plays a massive role in that pain. Back in the 1970s, researcher Bruce Alexander challenged this whole idea that drugs are inherently chemically irresistible. He looked at these older experiments where isolated rats stuck in barren, tiny cages would consistently choose to consume drug-laced water until they literally died. So he thought, what if we change the environment? He built Rat Park, this massive, enriched environment with climbing poles, toys, and plenty of other rats to socialize with. And the results? Totally astounding. The rats in the rich environment barely even touched the drug water, and not a single one overdosed. They simply didn't need it. Which brings us to this crucial concept, environmental dislocation. It's defined as the profound lack of social connection and stimulating environment that acts as a primary driver for compulsive, addictive behaviors. We are social creatures. When we're isolated, traumatized, or just completely disconnected from a supportive community, our brains are going to seek equilibrium anywhere they can find it. And sometimes that's in a bottle, a pill, or a compulsive behavior. Acknowledging that deep-rooted dislocation, that is the real surrender of step 1. So let's transition from our external environment to our internal landscape with Act 2, the inner work. This is where the heavy lifting really happens. We're moving out of theory and into pure actionable recovery. Let's walk through steps 4 to 9. Now, sometimes people hear phrases like moral inventory or admitting wrongs, and they immediately think of religious dogma. But I want you to look at this through a clinical, psychological lens instead. This is an incredibly effective mechanism to clear out psychological wreckage. Step 4 has you write down your resentments and fears. Step 5 has you say them out loud. Steps 8 and 9 have you actively repair the damage you've caused. It's a highly structured method to systematically pull up the roots of your emotional pain. But why is this inventory even necessary? One phrase, toxic shame. And listen, toxic shame isn't just feeling bad about something you did. It is the deeply grooved, terrifying belief that you inherently are bad. It often stems straight from that childhood trauma and family dysfunction we were talking about earlier. Taking a fearless inventory acts as a diagnostic tool. It exposes the hidden toxic shame that keeps the whole addiction cycle spinning on autopilot. You're basically dragging the monster out from under the bed and right into the light. And here's the beautiful part. By the time you reach step 9 and you're actually out there making direct amends to the people you've harmed, something incredibly uplifting happens. You start replacing this heavy, paralyzing burden of guilt with real clinical self-compassion. You're taking accountability, and that restores your agency. It proves to your own brain that you are no longer the helpless victim of your past, and it fully prepares your mind for long-term sustainable transformation. With the wreckage cleared out, we soar straight into Act 3, the rewiring. This shifts us into a highly forward-looking phase of recovery, bringing in the science of neuroplasticity and Step 11. A huge cornerstone of this is mindfulness-based relapse prevention, or MBRP. There's this technique pioneered by Dr. Alan Marlott called urge surfing. I want you to picture the intense cravings of an addicted brain like a massive ocean wave. In recovery, cravings are fierce, and your brain is screaming that you absolutely must act on them. Urge surfing teaches you to visualize these cravings as waves that naturally build, peak, and inevitably break. You learn to ride that wave using your breath as a surfboard, basically, without getting wiped out. And the science behind the trajectory of an urge perfectly backs this up. If you fight the urge, or if you feed it by planning to use, that's the spike you see there. The intensity shoots through the roof. But if you practice non-judgmental observation, if you just sit with the physical sensation of the craving, noticing your sweaty palms or racing heart without actually acting on it, the urge naturally crests and subsides. In fact, research shows that most urges last less than 30 minutes if we just don't feed them. Now, to help ride out those 30 minutes, MBRP uses this vital cognitive behavioral tool called the sober breathing space. It's a super helpful acronym. Stop. Observe what is happening internally. Breathe. Expand your awareness to your whole body. And finally, respond mindfully. This isn't just some cute relaxation trick. It is quite literally teaching a hijacked brain how to insert a pause between a trigger and an automatic reaction.
And honestly, that pause is everything. These mindful rewiring mechanisms physically change the brain. They interrupt the automatic pilot of addiction. They reduce your stress reactivity. They build self-control. And when you pair that with the 12-step concept of relying on a higher power, and hey, whether that's a traditional God, the universe, or just the strength of recovery group like Recovery Dharma, these grounding techniques systematically repair those neural pathways. You are literally restoring your own power of choice. Which brings us to the climax of our explainer today, Act 4, the awakening. So you've cleared the past, you've rewired the present, and now you reach the ultimate spiritual and neurological reward, Step 12. It says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And let me tell you, this isn't just a nice concluding thought. It is the absolute anchor of emotional sobriety. To keep your recovery, you kind of have to give it away. Being of service to others who are still suffering forces you out of your own head, and it builds this incredible fortress of supportive community around you. Just look at the direct contrast here. Think about where we started. The dark, helpless isolation of Step 1, right? The barren cage. And look where we end up. The vibrant, joyful connection of Step 12, the thriving rat park. All that inner work and neurological rewiring was the bridge between these two worlds. It proves that recovery isn't just about stopping the use of a substance. It's about fundamentally relocating your entire spirit from isolation into community. And that leaves us with this final, incredibly powerful realization. The opposite of addiction isn't just sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. Whether that's through the structured accountability of the 12 steps, the mindful rewiring of your brain, or just the simple, profound act of carrying the message to someone else who's in pain, healing happens together. So I'll leave you with this. What steps can you take today to build your own rat park? Thank you so much for exploring this blueprint with me today. Keep learning, keep connecting, and I'll see you next time.